Robert Morrow here from emailhomes.ca and hamiltonhomereview.com. We just discussed the offer, and one of the things that came up was the condition of inspection of the house. Now, I'll probably create a few enemies here, but I want to talk about inspections because they are critical, and they become more critical in the years gone by. I don't really believe 100% in inspections, and here's why. The inspector will come in and he charges $350 to $400. It's a highly competitive industry. They're not particularly licensed, so virtually anybody can become an inspector, and that's when you rely on me to give you a list of those that I know are good. But they will come in and they will look at everything in the home, all the little things, all the big things. They'll look at the roof, make sure it's okay and all that. And they will give you a binder full of things that are wrong with the house. Now, a lot of inexperienced buyers will then say to me, well, the seller needs to fix all this. They don't. And the reason for that is because you're not buying a brand new house. You're buying a house that's been lived in for, say, 10 years. You hope that the owner has upgraded a few things and kept things safe and all the rest of it. And that's what the inspector, part of what he's looking at, is to make sure that the home is safe and that everything is, nothing major is going to happen very, very soon. But sometimes I find that when an inspector, he's trying to sometimes justify the cost that he has, he's now looking at all the, for example, safety issues. The 2014 building code might say that you need railings in a certain place going downstairs. Yet this house has never had a railing because it was built in 1982 and it wasn't up to building code back then. Does that mean that we insist that the seller put in a railing? My answer to that is no, because he's never had to. It was part of when they bought the house, it was up to building code and they didn't need to. The inspector's telling you that, hey, in order to be 100% perfect in today's world, it needs to have a railing. So this then becomes something that we discuss, because often the seller will say, well, that's silly, we don't need to do that. And again, you're now focusing on things that aren't really that important. What we want to look at mostly is electrical. Is it safe and is it up to the code? We want to look at the roof because that's a major expense. We don't want to have to replace that in the next year. Is it going to last at least another 5 to 10 years? Often you have warranties, and that's great. We want to look at the furnace, which in and of itself becomes an issue because a lot of times if a furnace is more than 5 years old, buyers seem to think that we need to get a new one. Well, and inspectors will tell you that, hey, it's near the end of its life. If it's 15 years old, it might need to be replaced. Weigh what they're saying carefully, because often a furnace will last 20, 30 years. And if it's working now, when we've done the inspection and the furnace is working fine, why would the seller agree to replace it when there's no need to? Becomes a touchy subject, but and not as critical as it used to be, because furnaces don't cost that much anymore. For $4,000 you can get a brand new one. So my suggestion at that point is, well, no, we're not going to change the furnace when it's working fine. Understand that it's old, and within the next 5 to 10 years you may have to replace it, but you can't expect the seller to do that now. So these are all the kinds of things that you and I sit down and discuss, and I like to tell people up in front, because I'm not going to look at that binder and go to the seller and say, hey, Mr. Seller, fix everything in here, because that will cost that seller thousands of dollars, and has done in the past. And suddenly now they want to renegotiate the price, because now we're asking for a lot of things to be fixed, and if they don't fix it, then why don't you give us the money off the sale price so that we can fix it when we move in? Suddenly the negotiations start all over again, and there's a good chance you can lose the house because the seller disagrees at this point. What we're really looking for is something major that maybe even the seller doesn't know. Let's say there's a leak in the basement and he didn't know about it. If the inspector finds it, that's important. And most sellers at that point will either fix it or take money off the price of the house so that you can fix it. And that's something that has to happen immediate. All right? So if you have any specific questions about inspections, give me an email, because it is kind of a touchy subject, and often I will suggest to people that they don't put an inspection in. For example, in a condo, there's not a lot of reason for that, because the condo corporation looks after most of the stuff on the outside, the roof and all that kind of thing. So you're just kind of wasting money on some things. Sometimes you can just get a handyman in a lot cheaper, and he can look at the furnace and the plumbing and all that kind of stuff. More on that later. So we have now gone through the whole series. You've bought your house. We're coming up to the closing, and you're ready to move in.